Welcome back to Connecting the Dots. I'm Dan Komisky, and we're here today on a rainy Monday morning in the almost beginning of October, getting ready for this big election coming up. We've got Michael Gibbons with us. Thanks very much for coming in, Michael. Appreciate you coming.
Dan, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Before we get started, is there anything that you like? Just a little bit about yourself, why you're running, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I'm not a big person of a shameless self-promotion. That's really not my forte, even though I've pretty much spent my whole life in sales. So I'm one of those guys that you kind of find sort of under the radar, but I can almost guarantee that once you get an opportunity to work with me, that's usually where people find, yeah, this guy's all right. As far as leadership experience, I am a realtor. In 2020, I was actually president of the Chatham Association of Realtors.
Oh.
And obviously 2020, that's a great year to
That's a real good year to
be
get
in a
started on
leadership
anything.
role, because there's always two sides to every coin, and everyone's pushing either one way or the other, and then you're dealing with all the other normal everyday issues. So from that perspective, I definitely have not only learned a lot, but have had the opportunity to show that community what I'm capable of, and they said I could come back if I wanted, so I felt good about that. Also been involved with their political action committee for many years. Have worked on realtor issues, like in Toronto they have their own land transfer tax.
Mm-hmm.
So they have the provincial one that everyone deals with, then they have a municipal. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to allow that to go province-wide. The Ontario Real Estate Association said that sounds like a bad idea, and so we were tasked to go to our MPPs, write letters, speak to, lobby, and eventually, at least for now, there's nowhere else in Ontario that has a municipal land transfer tax.
Leave it to Toronto. Leave it to Toronto.
Well, they've always got ideas about everything, and
Yeah.
that's.
Well, I'm seeing just leave the tax with Toronto. Just leave it with them. They can have it. Like,
Sure,
we don't need that here. I
Absolutely.
agree with you.
No,
We should
no.
be fighting that. So
Yeah.
maybe on council you'd be fighting that too if you're doing provincial to
I would
municipality.
absolutely be willing to keep an eye on all of those sort of items, because we're people come from out of area and they look at properties, and one of the things that they often say to us is, what are the property taxes?
Yeah.
Well, of course we have those figures for them, and sometimes that definitely affects their decision as to which property they choose, or if they're looking at more than one area, whether they choose Chatham-Kent or whether they choose somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, with the prices the way they've been, comparatively to Toronto, we've seen our population grow because, the pandemic allowed people to work from home. They discovered that working from home meant they could go anywhere. Lower house prices in another area. All right, I'm going there.
Yeah. The problem is our Chatham residents lose. Because now
True.
we've got people in Chatham that are struggling to buy a house.
And there's also the investor market.
Yeah, so they throw another tax at them.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So.
So.
That actually, it kind of fits with what we're talking about today, because what we're talking about is things happening, and the public not being able to not only be informed, but have an opinion that is listened to and heard.
Certainly.
And to be taken care of, right? So,
Yep.
so as you know, today we're here to talk about, the interview will concentrate on three areas that concern the residents in the Tecumseh Park neighborhood. But really, they concern all residents in Chatham, because if this can happen here, it can happen anywhere. Right?
Well, it is obviously a concern to me too, because I do live in this neighborhood.
Oh, what street do you want? Maybe we shouldn't say. What's your exact address? So that we
you're
can let
going to
people know.
love this. My front door view is the Armories, Tecumseh Park, the band shell. So
10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, beautiful.
Well, we've been here almost 15 years.
Yeah.
So I do remember the Kiwanis Gardens, the way that they were at the time. I know many people are upset that they're gone now.
Yeah, I'd be one of them.
I lived there. It wasn't what it was. The fond memories that people have of it, I lived here pretty much all my life, so I have fond memories of it as a kid myself.
Yeah.
the fountain working, everything beautiful. It wasn't that anymore. And the fact of the matter is that I could stand on my porch about 5 feet up from the ground. So I can look over the berm, and I'm seeing the activity going on in there. People lighting up, people hanging out, taking bricks out of the walkway and throwing them in the pond, and just generally destroying, vandalizing, and just making a mess that nobody wanted to clean up.
Right.
So when they removed that, it definitely dropped that activity, because I had literally seen police cars go by and see what's going on the other side. They're missing it because they're in a car down here.
Well, they could also just patrol it. I mean, they've got to know what's going on. It's the same with the bandstand.
Yeah.
We know now there's people sleeping at the bandstand.
Oh.
Right. So, how often are we rousing them out?
Can confirm, yes.
You can probably see them. You might know them by name by now.
I do not. I don't approach them.
Yeah. Probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Probably. Well, you know what? Sometimes people are just hard up too, right? So it's
absolutely.
It's not for me to judge.
No.
Okay, so just to kind of frame the questions, I'll start with a little statement here. March 21st, 2022, Council decided to move the temporary emergency homeless shelter to a former elementary school on Murray Street, which if you're in the neighborhood, you know exactly where it is.
I know exactly where it is, yes.
Without consulting residents in the neighborhood, there's no public meetings prior to council decision, no open houses, no surveys, no direct communication with residents at all prior to approving a staff recommendation. Even 23 deputations. It's a lot of deputations. A lot of people asking questions, right?
Yep,
asking
absolutely.
for prior public consultation. They were all ignored by majority of council and by the mayor. Okay. How would you ensure proper public consultation take place?
Well, there's a process already in place for it.
Which is failing.
It has failed, yes.
Number of times, right?
Yes,
like it's
it
not
has.
like it's failed. From what we're starting to understand, it's not because it's not failing because, oh my God, it slipped through the cracks and all of a sudden there's an emergency shelter down the road. It's failing as far as I'm concerned, and this is my bias, and I'll put it out there, by design. So we've got to make sure that people know what's going on, and what's happening in their neighborhoods. If you're a realtor, what do I have to do to divide my property? If I wanted to make my property 2 properties and I wanted to build another house, what do I have to do with the public?
You have to go through a severance process.
How long does that take?
On average, I would say probably at least 2-3 months.
Yeah, so it's not 3 days?
If not 6.
It's not a 3-day vote?
No,
Yeah.
no.
So what do we do?
What do we do?
What do you do as a councilman to help us?
The main thing you would have to do is simply, prevent it from getting to that point. So, you're looking at what administration is doing, and you have to say, okay, well, there's got to be something here that we've missed. I mean, if we want to take this as a prime example, we know that at the end of May is when the one on the outskirts of town, that's when their lease ended. Now, what we're looking at is March here. So the investors that own that property did not own that property for a long time. It's not something they had in their back pocket and just said, oh, I see you guys are having a problem, maybe we can work something out quickly. That can't be the case. They had to purchase that property first. That takes time. So the question then becomes, well, why did they purchase that property? I don't know who the investors are. I could guess. That being the case, based on things that they've purchased previously, what purpose does that property serve to them to purchase? It almost seems like there was something. Administration kind of said, okay, well, we held back. There was nothing going on, and we had to scramble.
Right.
Okay, so you had to scramble because it had to look like you were doing something.
Well, when did you decide it was time to scramble? Right. The word scramble is a funny word.
Well, yeah. I mean, you decide to scramble once you know that there's something in progress that you're not in control of, or that you should be sharing with the public.
Right. So how do we make sure that the public gets consultation?
That's dealing with something that is above and beyond what the role of council can really deal with.
Oh, really? So, the way I understand it, in terms of the system, right? Staff makes a recommendation. Well, I've got it here. March 7th,
we can go
talked
over it
about
all
that.
we want,
So
but
they
the
make
system failed.
right. So the question is, how do we change the system? If there's a 3-day opportunity, there's 3 days that they were given to make the vote, to do the vote, for a situation where the public hasn't been consulted. How hard can it be to change the rules to say no?
But the
if I'm
lease
going to
was-
have a private person
Yeah.
sever their property, it's going to take 90 days. We're not going to be able to ram down an emergency shelter down the street from residential homes and children and people playing and a brand new school, brand
Yeah.
new Muslim school essentially for over the last 10 years. You know, they don't owe us anything, but I've got to give them 90 days if I'm going to sever my property. It seems like something's amiss, right? So we've got.
That's what I'm saying.
So what do we do?
Something's amiss.
So we got to change the rules.
Definitely.
Okay, but I'm sorry, I'm leading too much. I apologize.
No, that's
but
okay.
You start thinking about it, right?
That's
There's got to be a way to protect the public.
Yeah, exactly,
You know.
exactly. But I mean, what we're dealing with is something that is the processes had to be put aside because that lease was ending, and if they did nothing, which was the only option administration would have had, because they weren't, I don't think they were involved heavily in how we got the shelter where it is.
You don't. So it's a bit of a loaded statement. So why? So they weren't involved. You're saying because of the outside investors.
Possibly.
So that there's a connection maybe between the outside investors and the staff.
Yep.
And then you go in and you've got 3 days to vote.
I think council was thrown under the bus and put in a position where administration could say, okay, well, the public can't fire us, but they can fire council.
Because I mean, we can pretend that they were scrambling at the last minute for this lease, but I know that I have a lease that I just got out of.
Yep.
And you know what I knew the day I signed the lease?
When it was ending.
I knew exactly, magically, when it was over.
Yep.
It was a 1-year lease.
Yeah.
Right? So I knew that after 1 year, I had to make plans to make sure that my private business in that lease was over. Right?
Now, the benefit of having private investors involved is the tax savings. So maybe the hope was that, okay, if we show that we're providing emergency homeless shelter, we're providing tax savings by doing it this way, we look like heroes to the majority of people because the majority of Chatham-Kent isn't here. But now Chatham-Kent has an emergency homeless shelter, just like they have a hospice, which is wonderful. But we have it. So the general image is that we have it, and we save taxpayer money doing it.
Yeah.
But the fact is that
we don't
the
want
few-
an emergency shelter, though.
No,
When
but
you
the
talk
few
to the
people
actual
that are
councilman
the
now-
few people that are here, that's collateral damage.
I would say collateral damage is probably, I would say actually just damage. You know, because
Yeah.
there's nothing collateral about our house. Nothing collateral about this house, about
Fair
your
enough.
house. Right?
Fair enough.
You pay bills, you have a
Yep.
family, you take care
Absolutely.
of business, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so sorry to get back on track here. Do you think CK Council, and we're kind of going back to the same thing here, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you think they require more information from staff to make effective decisions? And I would say more timely. But so that's kind of a yes/no question. But from what you're saying, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, so correct me. But you're saying you believe that the council was put under the bus
Yeah.
by the staff and the private investors who rammed this thing forward to them and gave them 3 days to vote.
Yeah, I'm probably going to look like a conspiracy theorist, which is embarrassing.
Oh, don't use those words.
But,
they're magic words that get everybody in trouble.
Yeah, they do, and it's unfortunate.
Unless there's a conspiracy.
Yeah,
In which case,
I'm probably killing my chances here right now.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think honestly we're trying to get to the bottom of something, and from outside counsel, it's hard, and we've noticed this. It's hard to. These questions are tough because what do you have in place for procedures for what do you have in place for your next steps in terms of the meetings? Well, you haven't done it yet, right? So I guess I guess I'll go to the next question. If you find yourself in a conflict of interest in a situation like this,
Conflict
Or-
of interest is simple. You walk away.
You just walk away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Should never be afraid to declare a conflict of interest.
No, I
There's
would agree with that.
No reason.
Okay, so March 7th, 2022. We talk about this a little bit. The staff, I'm just going to hold on until that siren's gone. Getting to be a little bit veteran here, starting to understand how this works.
Yeah, certainly.
You know.
Yep.
All right, March 7th, 2022, a staff recommendation to expand facilities and programs at Hope Haven was put on hold to investigate a $1.2 million offer from a secret group of investors to move the shelter away from downtown. The investors were called, by the way, they were called Community Partners.
Okay.
Can I check that? It was Community Partners? So Community Partners, they weren't called secret investors.
Well,
they were called
secret
Community
investors
Partners.
would.
Just bringing that up
I
because
see.
they were secret investors because nobody knew who they were until after it was done.
Sure.
Right? New staff recommendation with a new investor option was presented as a done deal in Chatham Daily News on Friday, March 18th, 2022, and passed by council and mayor on Monday, March 21st, 2022. So we see those timelines that I was so frustrated about when I was asking you. Right?
Sure.
So the staff puts this forward, and they say, now you got to vote on it. It's March 18th.
Yep.
You have until the 21st, which is Monday.
Yep.
And their other option is to defer. So they've got 3 days. If somebody wants to defer, that one council member has 3 days to convince all the other council members that they need to defer, or to convince 10 of the 12 rather, not all of them. Doesn't have to be unanimous, but they need 10 of the 12 votes, right? So question number one, in a short turnaround like that, would you vote for a homeless shelter in a residential neighborhood? It doesn't have to be a short turnaround, you know?
Yeah.
How do you feel about residential neighborhoods having an emergency shelter such as this put in them, I guess is the question.
Questionable at best. See, the problem with it is that it's an emergency homeless shelter. It's a Band-Aid solution regardless. It's not a permanent solution. The setup is not what it should be in terms of being able to be in a residential neighborhood. It doesn't provide the services that the homeless population, the population that has mental health issues, the population that has addiction concerns, it doesn't address any of those issues. It's just a place for somebody to be for a night, which, in and of itself is a good thing. The whole Hope Haven issue, it was the business owners in the King Street area, Wellington Street. There had been a rash of break-ins, that kind of thing. So, those business owners come in the morning and the copper dripped out of their air conditioning units, that kind of thing. So the business owners really pushed back on that Hope Haven issue, and some of the people on council are business owners themselves. Business does speak. That's
So we need that.
we need those businesses.
We need those businesses, and we need people on council who are business owners.
So
That's not an issue.
they kind of looked at that and said, okay, well, I don't want this happening to me either. And I think it's just a bigger lobby group than what residents are capable of being, to a certain degree. And
It's a bigger lobby
they
group
just
between the businesses to
versus
lobby
residents.
for it versus the residents to lobby against it.
Yeah.
It's a pretty accurate statement. I
So
think.
the businesses kind of went, okay, we can't have this. We can't have these people doing these things because this is so close to us. So they had to figure out where else to put it. And like some have said, there's a lot of empty commercial property in Chatham-Kent, but it's suitable commercial property. You can't just take a warehouse and you can't just warehouse these people. You can't just take a home that's maybe business on the bottom and has residential on top. There's not enough space. So it has to be something that has the right kind of space, that has the right kind of facilities to allow everything to work.
If you're going to house 50 people, you need sewage. You need electricity. You need all the services.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we
so
don't
there is
need
some of that.
We don't need to house 50. We need to house 300.
Well, that hits 50.
Yeah.
That's 52, I think, isn't it?
So again, that's why I say
Right around
it's a Band-Aid solution. And generally speaking, I don't think it's the stayers that are really the issue. It's the ones that aren't staying.
Yeah, I hear that, and I would agree that there are people who are in trouble who are very respectful and very, very respectable, and they just have had a bad run of luck.
Absolutely.
You know, and
It's
because
not.
all of us in life, eventually you get a bad run of luck.
Yeah.
You know, and some people get a bad run of luck, and it takes them all the way down to the street. That
Yep.
sucks.
It does.
You know, and we want to make sure we help those people. So
Yep.
it's not about not helping them. It's about how do you help them and not tear down another neighborhood.
Right.
You know, how do you, instead of just putting it all on this side of the river kind of thing, right? So I get that. So what kind of services and support should be in place for the neighborhood then? So you're saying that you need to have the right services. So what kind of services and support should be in the neighborhood, not only for, you know, an emergency shelter like this, but for the neighborhood? Like what do you, so now we've got a Band-Aid solution. It's a 3-year Band-Aid solution, right? As long as everybody's doing
Sure.
what they're saying they're doing,
Sure.
that's what it is. So if that's, everybody's doing what they're saying, what do we get? What do we need for services? If you're a councilman, what do you think?
Well, I know that they've increased police presence. I see a lot more patrols going around. I often see police cars out in front of the armories, that kind of thing. I know one night there were two cruisers and the I can't remember what the name of it. It used to be the CIRT. I don't know if it's still called that, but Crisis Intervention Team. They were all over at the Dan Shell. They were there quite a while, so I'm assuming that they were, you know, having conversation with those individuals that are there. So, I mean, it looks like they're trying to respond. I mean, sure, we can catch somebody in our backyard stealing our bicycle or whatever. If the cops can get there in time, great. But the police can't do anything to anyone who hasn't done anything. So there's no preemptive. You know, we can say that we see somebody casing a joint, that kind of thing. What are they going to do? Because there's no.
Well, what do they do after? Right? I caught a guy breaking into my house. What do they do after?
Yeah, most likely catching
Guy's
police.
still on King Street.
Yep. Yeah, I can appreciate that.
Right, and that's not a shot against the police, because I agree they are
Sure.
trying to increase
Yeah.
their presence down here. We've seen we've seen a little more even down in my neck of the woods, which is not
Yep.
you're kind of the main drag right on the front line kind of. So
Yeah,
to
I
speak, in
mean, long
terms of
before the homeless
park,
shelter,
right?
I used to see people come off of Murray Street on their bikes with their backpacks about 10 o'clock at night. I'm sure that they know where they're going, but then, you know, probably come back 4 o'clock in the morning, I don't know.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
you know.
So you see that. So
Yeah.
So then,
that
what is
activity's
there any
been
other
here for a long
services that
time.
you think should be put in place to protect the neighborhood, to protect that Murray Street? Like what? That's an interesting street, right? So now we got an emergency shelter on one end, and you walk along. If you walk along after dark, you know, what do you want for your daughter, your son, if they're 12 years old and they get for some reason they're out at 9 o'clock at night, you know, or 14 or 15, you know, how do we protect them?
That's an excellent question. You know, I mean, anywhere that there's a supply of materials to assist the homeless, regardless of their reasons for being, you're going to find people in that area. We've got the shelter here, so we have people in our area here. There's whatever's left of Hope Haven downtown. There's people in that area. Downtown core obviously is very popular. I understand that Free Help CK is out towards Oxley. I understand they've seen an uptick in people out there. Any of the areas that have probably thrift stores, that kind of thing, are also going to see people around, just to be able to, you know, if there's, sometimes they throw out clothes, that kind of thing. Anywhere you can get supply. So it's not just an us problem. I mean, listen.
So again, it's not just an us problem. But I also know that in our neighborhood, there's been twice as many calls to the police. There's been a lot more break-ins. There's been a lot more car break-ins back down in here.
Yes.
There's been a lot more. There's been violence on right on this street right here. There's been domestic violence in front of young children. Right, like we know that all of this is happening, and it wasn't happening before. So although it's not an us problem, it may be a we're closer problem.
Yes.
Right, and we're dealing with it problem. Whereas, if you're downtown, you're by a business, well, they're dealing with it from 9 to 5, but their kids aren't dealing with it at night, right? So this is where I'm saying, what kind of services? Like, do we need? What would you do? Anyway, that's just
Yeah, I mean, if it's counseling services that they need for kids, that kind of thing, if they need an outreach program to go to the residents, say that what do we need to get rock missions in here more often to kind of give these people something else.
Rock missions, what would they do exactly?
Rock missions is they're a service nonprofit. Basically what they do is they make lunches, and they have people on their staff that have actually been homeless themselves, that recognize the homeless community, and really spend time with them and integrate and do their best to kind of lift them up.
Great, and we need that for the homeless community.
Yeah.
But this goes back to my other question: why is it in my neighborhood? So now we're going to bring Rock Missions in, and they're going to start supporting more homeless people here. And so we see the fear that we have in the neighborhood. The residents have, okay, well, now we got a 3-year emergency shelter. We got a cultural center that they're threatening to close. And all of a sudden we got a big empty building right over there. It's all on the same street.
Yeah.
And now, okay, so let's bring more services in for the homeless. I care about the homeless. I care more about my aunt who lives in the neighborhood, and my cousin, and my uncle, and their kids, and their nephews and nieces. How do we support them at the same time? Do you see the conundrum, right?
I do. I'd like to know what it is they need first.
That's a great question.
What is it? I mean, we look at the needs of the homeless, and this is why it's here. So what are the needs of the residents? What do you feel are the needs of the residents?
So I think that when you get elected, that's the first question I'd like you to ask.
Fair enough.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Would you require municipal staff to regularly make progress reports to council on the operation of the emergency shelter,
At least a quarter.
Let me just do that one more time.
Yeah, sure.
Would you require more information from staff to council on things like this emergency shelter, and kind of how often would you look for reports?
I would think
What
at
do you
least a quarterly report would be reasonable.
Yeah, quarterly, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, to some degree, I would think at least is about my favorite words in that sentence, But at the same time, it's how much paper on your desk to support, with your other business. You're selling houses, you're
Sure.
doing other things.
Yeah.
Right? So you're elected to council. You got to be able to get through this stuff, right?
Yes, but I think it's just like, being a realtor, you're on call 24/7.
Yeah.
It's nature of the business. I spent about 20 years working in retail. So nights, weekends, that's my life. It always has been. So being a realtor from that perspective, hasn't changed anything. I think I would look at the job of counselor very similarly. It's not a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. It's not a just show up Monday nights and talk about severances and although that's committee of adjustment, that's a different thing. But talk about which sidewalk is going where and why. There's certain hot button issues that are actually going to make a meeting larger. I agree with Michael Bondi. I think those should be singled out. They shouldn't be put on a consent agenda and just pushed through.
Maybe we should prioritize some things.
I think prioritizing would be an excellent idea.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement wholeheartedly. In terms of transparency, what will you do as a council to ensure that CK residents can clearly see the municipality is planning to do? What the municipality is planning to do, and how council, mayor, and staff will go about delivering on those plans. So when we're talking about this, it really comes back to this 3-year deal, right? So at what point do we start planning to shut this place down when we know when the lease is up? Like, should we plan for it now? What do you think? Like, when does that process start?
I
right?
can't see a reason not to start now.
Yeah, that
I
makes
really
sense.
can't. It's just logical that, okay, we know that we've put the Band-Aid on the wound. We've shown that we care. Now, what are the next steps? We don't want another emergency homeless shelter, whether it be still be here or whether it be somewhere else. We don't need another emergency homeless shelter. We need those in need to go that are going to be able to get the services that they need. And that's not going to be a school that can hold 50 people.
Very much not. Agreed. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
gonna. It's. We have to figure out what that looks like. We have to figure out how it's going to operate, and we have to ensure that it has all the services they require to not stay homeless. Now, I mean, a lot of organizations, housing issue. You're looking at. There's a lot of organizations that can house. Not only just from Chatham-Kent Social Housing, but CMHA, United Way. There's so many organizations out there that involved in housing, but they all have their own funding. They all have their own streams of communication, and those institutions don't necessarily work together. So it's also working with municipality to bridge with those organizations and say, okay, how do we get the help everybody needs? Because it's all about funding. Everybody's siloed in their individual programs. Because if they start working with X, well then they don't need as much funding, so they get cut.
Which is half the problem with government.
It's a challenge.
Maybe more
it's a challenge in government. It's one of the reasons that nonprofits exist, is because they're trying to help. They can get a certain amount of funding, but I mean, any nonprofit, they've got their boxes out. They've got someone who's canvassing. They've got someone looking for more money for their organization to make things happen. Mm-hmm. We have the capacity to be able to. Cross programs. We have the ability to get this director and this director together and say, okay, well, we need this program here. The real estate organization, the Chatham-Kent Association of Realtors, we've been asked a couple of times to be involved in initiatives that involve other organizations and the municipality itself. That has more than once fallen apart, simply because not enough people are able to convince their organizations that it's worth it, that they can afford to do this, because once they're using less funding because they're working with other organizations, they get cut.
And then people lose jobs.
And then there's no one running the program.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge on many levels.
So then, in terms of battling homelessness in Chatham-Kent or really anywhere, mm-hmm. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what you're saying is what we need to do is bring all of these organizations together in some capacity to start to work together, and that sounds like a challenge because of budgeting, but mm-hmm. it makes sense.
Well, that's kind of my campaign slogan: new perspective.
There you go. Well, I appreciate it. I think that's a great place to end with the questioning. Is there anything else that you would like to say to the Chatham-Kent residents before we let go? And you don't have to, because we can cut this question too. But
yeah.
If you'd like to, if there's any other messages you'd like to, after we've been sitting here, I know that it's a contentious issue, and I ask pointed questions.
Oh, it's an ugly issue. There's no question about that. Yeah, absolutely. Because
there are a whole bunch of people down in this neighborhood and in other neighborhoods in Chatham who have been dealt this hand before, mm-hmm. right? Who we're also going to be interviewing. To find some of those similarities to see how that happened for them. Right?
Sure.
But is there anything else you'd like to say just about your campaign and about moving forward?
I think my personal focus is looking at getting council to think for itself. I do agree with some others that oftentimes council's kind of led around by the nose. That we spend way too much on consultants' fees. That it's like we don't. It's like we can't utilize what we have effectively, and that deeply concerns me. I mean, it's not like the people that are on council walk in to council chambers and are suddenly not as smart as they used to be. And that seems to kind of be the public's impression, and that's unfortunate, because I think that I mean, I've met every councillor. I've met the mayor. They all seem like decent people. You know, it's not a people problem. It's a communication issue.
Okay.
You know, and I think that we should work better to communicate, whether it be between council and staff, whether it be between the public and council, whether it be between, you know, organizations. Communication is key.
I'd agree with that too. Michael, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck with your election. And,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And yeah,
Thanks very much.
this is Dan Komisky. Thanks for watching Connecting the Dots.